Hello, everyone. Welcome to our town hall event hosted by the Contextualization and Commemoration Initiative, or CCI. We use a shorter one because Contextualization and Commemoration Initiative is not a fun thing to say repeatedly. My name is Corinne Floyd. I'm the student coordinator for the East Mall and Sweat Painter projects. Some of you are joining us today in person and others are watching on the live stream. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to be here. We really appreciate all of the attention that you guys give to these projects and that you're all here to hear some updates. So during today's town hall session, we will discuss updates on CCI's work, including research on UT's history and the commemoration building projects, the Sweat v. Painter project at TS Painter Hall and the precursors We Are Texas East Mall project. After each section, and there will be 3 today, there will be a time for questions and answers for the presenter before we move on to the next section of the presentations. After the presentation concludes, we'll open the floor for a more open discussion where you can ask additional questions and offer comments and feedback on the materials presented. For those of you viewing online, you can submit your questions using the form underneath the video stream. All right, I'm going to read a land acknowledgement now. CCI recognizes both the land and those peoples associated with it who have lived on, stewarded, and enjoyed it before its contemporary form, Central Texas. In our work, we foreground an understanding of this space and settler colonialism, its destruction and removal of indigenous people, creating a rupture between people and land, the lack of a primary relationship with the land and ancestry, and the omission of these histories and sensibilities. Thus, as we engage in our interchange today, we remember the indigenous people of the lands we currently occupy. We remember as well the struggles and legacies of Tejano, Black, Asian, Native American, and other peoples who have created this space within the context of ongoing dispossession and cultural violence. Okay, so today we'll have 2 presenters, Dr. Edmund T. Gordon. He's a professor here in African and African Diaspora Studies and the executive director of the CCI initiative, We also have Victoria Cheney, who is a designer with Mass Design. So I'll go ahead and let you guys introduce yourselves. I believe Dr. Gordon is presenting first. You can clap.
Did you have to ask for people to clap? You know we're in trouble.
People went for it and hesitated.
All right, good. All right, well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. It's good to see you all. Thank you for that introduction. Hello, all you in TV land. We're here to talk about the commemorative projects that we've got going here on campus. These, lest we forget, are the fruit of mostly student demand in the context of the George Floyd incident and the racial eruptions in this country in the teeth of the pandemic in 2020. At that time, 11,000 students and others signed a petition asking for various kinds of changes on this campus. And amongst those changes were changes to the kinds of representations of itself that the campus or the university was making through its built environment. Amongst two of the things that were asked for, or one of the things that was asked for, was a change in the name of Painter Hall. And the administration responded by saying they would not change the name, but they would go ahead and create a sweat entrance to Painter Hall, as well as an exhibition space within it. The other thing that the president said he would do was to create a commemorative space on the East Mall of this campus, the mall where the Martin Luther King statue is, and that commemorative space would be dedicated to the precursors, who are the Black students who came into the university as undergraduates in the period after Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. Most came in 1956, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then the precursors and others who helped to make the university what it is or what it aspires to be, which is a university for all Texans. Now, commemorations are a number of different things, celebrations. They also tend to highlight individual achievements, but what they all aspire to do is to create some kind of notion of a history, an admired history, that then becomes a guide to the present and then to activities in the future. One of the things that we aspire to do in the 2 commemorative projects that we've been assigned to bring forward is we aspire to provide the kind of scholarly and rigorous critical research necessary to be able to tell the stories in public history through the commemorative sites. In trying to do that, we've done a series of research projects. We have various faculty members across the university who we've asked to participate in that. And then we have a research team associated with the CCI who have been engaged in this kind of activity for almost 2 years now. One of the key things that we've tried to do is establish and fill in the historical record in relationship to the precursors so that the commemorative site that we're creating in celebration of them also can contain a public history which is accurate. Now, unfortunately, in the history of the University of Texas, it's been very difficult to establish that history, the history, in other words, of the integration of the university. And in this particular case, it's been difficult to establish who and when these undergraduates, these black undergraduates, these black individuals were who actually integrated the university. One of the reasons that that's important is because this university was amongst the first in the South to actually undergo integration. In fact, the university was integrated on the basis of the Sweat versus Painter decision, which was 1950, which is the precursor for Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. So as you'll see, there were a number of black students on this campus way before black students were allowed in other flagship universities of the U.S. South. Allison Kim, who's sitting right there, has spent the last year in the archives and behind a computer screen trying to help us fill in this history. We developed a methodology to try to determine who these black students were, who came in 55, 56, et cetera, because the university claimed, with some reason, that it was impossible to do this history because they weren't keeping account of or track of the race of students who came into the university in 1954, 55, and 56, which was not exactly true, but the records that the university was dealing with don't have a designator, a racial designator on them. However, one of the things that Allison and the rest of us developed was a way of, and probably for most black people at least, it's a no-brainer, a way of determining who was black and who wasn't at that time, was to determine the institutions that we were allowed to populate. In other words, every student record tells you what institution was the immediate previous institution that the student attended. Back in 1950, 54, 55, 56, those could only be historically black institutions. And so by going through and locating the folks who went to historically black institutions before they came to the University of Texas, we were able to determine who those black folks were. And we came up with some really interesting conclusions in that regard. People like Colonel Holland, a number of years ago, and he's sitting right here, in an attempt to make a list or to document the black students who came in 1956, went through yearbooks, interviewed each other, created lists, et cetera, and came up with a list of 74 black students who they could determine came in 1956. This was in the absence of the university being able to make this determination itself. So the precursors as we knew them were folks who Colonel Holland and other precursors themselves were able to compile for us. But through the work that Dr. Kim has done, we discovered that, in fact, some of those 74 students probably should not have been on that list, because remember, this is a list being made through people's memories, through yearbook pictures, et cetera, et cetera. But what we determined, for example, was that there were 20 additional students who had been forgotten or unknown, et cetera, et cetera. So that there were a number more, substantially more, Black students who came in during that time than even the precursors themselves could remember. Because again, the university was unable to come up with these kinds of lists. In 1956, 53 of them entered as freshmen and 30 entered as transfer students. All right? So this was when the bulk of students came in. However, it turns out that there were 10 undergraduate students, African Americans, Black people, who came in before that fall of 1956, which was something that the precursors had not remembered or didn't know, and the university had no clue. So in point of fact, one student came in 1954, which is actually an amazing, it's an amazing discovery. It's also kind of bends credulity, because this person was able to come in directly after the Supreme Court decision in 1954, snuck in and entered into the School of Architecture as an undergraduate student. So it's the research that we've done has provided us with a number of really, startling occurrences and information. It also turns out, let's go through here, the Black undergraduates, let's go into here. It turns out that there were 7 Black students who came in the summer of 1950 as graduate students, all right after Sweat versus Painter. But it also turns out that there are now more than 408 that we discovered. It's 438, 478. There were, from what we've discovered, 478 graduate students who came into the university between 1950 and 1956. Now, in relationship to the overall population of the University of Texas, that's not a whole bunch. But in relationship to what was going on elsewhere in the South, and in relation to what we remember and knew up until very recently, it's an astounding number. Most of these were women, Black women who came in. That just gives you a bit of a background, a small piece or a small insight into the kind of research that we're currently doing to try to reconstruct the history of the university in relation to these kinds of things. If you are aware at all of the kinds of things that have been going on for the last, actually over a decade now, in places like Brown University or Georgetown, or even the University of Mississippi, certainly Virginia, you know that universities have made a concerted effort to try to think about their racial past as a means of coming to terms with them. The University of Texas has not been very good at that up until this moment. And CCI group here that's attempting, and dedicated other faculty members who are working with us, who are trying to uncover important aspects of that past. There's nothing more important, at least as far as we're concerned, than trying to help the precursors come to terms with the facts of what actually occurred and what they accomplished when they entered the university in 56, 54, 55, 56. Any questions about all this? All right. I'm glad I was able to be clear enough so there's no issues. Next thing that I have been asked by Corin to talk about is the project that we're doing at Painter Hall. We refer to it as a Sweat v. Painter project. one of the things that we've been thinking through is the ways in which namings of buildings and spaces on a campus like this that involve the honoring or the honorific naming of individuals are always fraught. In other words, the kinds of things that individuals do that give them or have us give them individual recognition over time oftentimes turn out to be not to be the kinds of values that at a particular time we still find worthy of honorary recognition. People also have a lot of things that are sometimes hidden in their backgrounds. Painter is a good example of that in the sense that students wanted to change the name of Painter Hall because Painter was the president of the university when Heman Sweat and the NAACP sued the university in order to have Sweat be able to attend the law school. A suit which Painter and the university later lost, but the fact that his name was on the key Supreme Court decision which began to open up higher education to black folks in this country was enough for students to think that perhaps the name should be changed. One of the things that our research has uncovered, and in fact, Dr. Olivia Mena has been the one working on this, is that Painter is problematic not only, or maybe not even mostly, because he was the president whose name is on Sweat versus Painter. He was also a noted eugenist. And one of the persons who, as president of the university and as a eugenist, was key in the movement to keep universities like the University of Texas segregated during the 40s, 50s, and ultimately the 60s. So there's ample reason to think about changing the name. We are not going to do that here, but we at least like to think about the process in relationship to this building rather than the individual names. So Sweat versus Painter honors that process of transformation rather than thinking about whether we're honoring or dishonoring Painter, et cetera. This project has gone through a number of ups and downs and ins and outs over time. Currently, what we're trying to do with this is this is Painter Hall. This is the north. This is the building, a CNS building, College of Natural Sciences building. It is a classroom building, but it also has laboratories in it. It is an old building. And one of the main things about this building when it was decided that a commemorative space would be created or a commemorative entrance would be created in honor of Heman Sweat was that because it's an old building, it's inaccessible, not accessible. You can't get in there unless you climb stairs. Such that the only accessible entrance, which has to then be the celebrated entrance, is down here in the basement to the east side of the building. So when we had our first meetings in town halls with stakeholders to discuss, creating a Sweat entrance, the first thing that people said was, a no-brainer. You can't have a entrance that celebrates Heman Sweat that's inaccessible because Heman Sweat is, of course, all about accessibility to the institution. So we did a bunch of things. We designed an elevator that was going to come up the side over here. That got tossed out. We designed a grand entrance to the north where Painter Hall has its name on there, and we were going to blow out a bunch of stairways and spend tens of millions of dollars. And now we are on a more practical, I suppose, route, which is going to try to orient the Sweat entrance to the building to the project to reinvigorate the tower and the malls that circulate the tower, and have the sweat entrance be part of that whole kind of grand gesture in relationship to the tower in the center of the university. So the idea now is to re-landscape this area here, which is to the south. The turtle pond is over here. The tower is over here. Re-landscape this in a way that makes it the Sweat Plaza. Open up an entrance into Painter Hall here that is accessible, right? So that's the key aspect here. Perhaps collaborate with CNS in terms of some of the ideas they have about how they want to reconfigure their space inside here. And then, interestingly, for all you architecture students who are out there in TV land, rethink this northern entrance in a way which makes it clear that it is no longer the main entrance and that the Sweat entrance is not the back door, but in fact the front door to the building. I think we got some slides that were from a previous kind of iteration of what might happen. This is possibilities for what the landscaping to the north might look like, and these are just one possibility of what the landscape to the, where are we? South entrance here might look like, but those are just possible configurations. All right. Uli also thought you might be interested in having a look at some of the other things that we're doing in relationship to the Sweat Painter project, because one of the key aspects, just like with the South Mall and the East Mall and the precursors, the history that's behind the commemoration is very important to us. And so we've been doing a lot of work. This is, again, Dr. Livamena and Tucker Collin here have been doing a lot of archival work to document the history, the civil rights history that went before the Sweat Painter decision here in Texas, because Texas played a very big role. It was, as we've discovered, was one of the key areas of strength for the NAACP. And we've also begun to document the different civil rights figures who ended up playing a role in terms of integrating the university, and particularly who played a role in the Sweat v. Painter decision, which was, again, a landmark decision, paved the way for Brown versus the Board of Education, and also document the first graduate students who came in. This is Virgil Lott, the first law graduate from the University of Texas, Oscar Leonard Thompson, the first graduate, black graduate of the University of Texas, et cetera. So that's what we've got for the Sweat Painter project. Any questions about that? Yes, Maggie.
What is the status right now?
The status right now is, since we've gone back to the drawing board, we're drawing on the drawing board, and we are trying to create this new entrance, trying to create a design for the landscape on the south and the north. We've got a commitment to include the landscape that gets designed for the south part of the building, which will be the Sweat Plaza portion of the building, in the whole restoration of the tower. And we're trying to dig up the resources necessary in order to be able to put this all together. So it's moving forward. It's been slow. We decided to do these things in 2020. It's 2023. Anything else? Because we're about to get to the high point of the presentation, which is Victoria Cheney, who is going to talk to us about the East Mall. Thank you, Victoria.
Just a quick reminder for questions. Because we're on the live stream, we do need you guys to wait for the mic. So just raise your hand and we'll bring it over to you.
Okay.
So thank you everyone for attending today and Dr. Gordon for the background. My name is Victoria Cheney and I am a designer with the Mass Design Group team and have been working closely with Dr. Gordon's team and the larger project team on the East Mall redesign. So as students and faculty, community members and staff, we all have some level of connection to the campus, and I came to UT as a grad student in the School of Architecture and remember being met with this feeling of a familial sense and a sense of community, and found later that that's something that really resonates throughout the student body. And being based in the West Mall area of campus, I didn't travel much as often to the East Mall side of campus, and I also didn't encounter much of the story of the precursors. However, in working with them and working so closely with them through engagements, I'm really inspired by their courage and hope that future students in the university also find courage through their story as we work to uplift it. So I'll be talking today about the East Mall context and history. So we'll begin with that, and then we'll move into the work that we've done with community engagement, working closely with the stakeholders and the precursors. And we'll also talk about the conceptual design and the standing of that. And then we'll open up space at the end for questions, and we'll also open some prompts to see what's resonating with you about the project and see what really is exciting to you, and capturing your thoughts about the standing of the design. So that leads us into project grounding. And to understand how we arrived at the design that you'll see shortly, it's important to first understand the history of the place and the people and the context in which we're working. So there are a series of axial relationships throughout the campus that exist and that are in dialogue with the greater city. We see a connection between the heart of the state's economy and legislation that are directly south of the campus at the state capitol, in connection with the tower. And we also see the axial connection of the East Mall, which we hope will be a space in which we can create a new thread or a new destination to arrive at on the campus, and really creating a new campus core. So the project celebrates a legacy of the collective action of students and the efforts of those courageous students, of the precursors and others who afforded access to higher education through desegregation at UT in 1956, as Dr. Gordon just spoke to. The East Mall has the potential to become the space of storytelling that will amplify largely the story of the precursors and others who shaped this space into a space for all Texans. So regarding the history of desegregation, we've heard the story of Ruby Bridges and of James Meredith, but there's an important local history to tell here. We say that what starts here changes the world, and that really rings true with what we've heard from the case of Human Sweat. In 1946, Sweat applied as a graduate student to the UT School of Law and was successfully able to enroll in 1950, making way for the first cohort of Black undergraduates to successfully enroll in the fall of 1956, but as we've also learned even before that. And as an embodiment of agency, the precursors steered the university toward what it is today. Their breakthrough would go on to change the nation and the world. And the precursors carved into the bedrock of the university with their efforts, their fortitude, and their unwavering persistence. Leading us to our task today of appropriately solidifying their place in history and the public history and recounting of how this institution has evolved. While there were a myriad of experiences among the 1956 students and those who enrolled subsequently, our mission is to amplify their stories and making this a space for all. So in approaching this work, we have 4 grounding principles. The first being to proclaim the strength and dignity of the precursors. The second being embracing the campus, the East Mall, as a new campus core, a new threshold, a new destination. The third, evoking a generational connection to the precursors and those who came before us, as well as their values as guiding principles. And finally, revitalizing the East Mall as a new living and breathing, ecologically and biodiverse site and landscape to support the future of the institution. So these 4 grounding principles have come to this point through what we've heard through our community engagement and workshops with you all. which leads us into the larger framework that we've outlined through our community engagement efforts. So over the past year, we've had a series of workshops and meetings that have really highlighted the importance of the stories, the importance of the ecology and rich history of the place. And all of that has been captured in this visioning report that we delivered earlier in the year in July. And your input and feedback has highlighted the joys and the pain points of the East Mall today. We've heard favorite memories of this place being a place where homecomings and gatherings were held, the rich history of Waller Creek, the comfort under the protected live oaks, and all of this has been captured in what we have written in this body of work and also in the conceptual design. But more intimately, as we've engaged the student body and everyday passerby in the space, we've been able to understand this history through a series of temporary activities that we brought to the space. So in creating a built space of acknowledgement, of celebration, and public history sharing, there is both a physical and a mental process to undertake that starts well before the construction process. So you see here one of our first site activations, and some of you might have had the opportunity to walk through it, in which 117 names of precursors, both known and unknown, were uplifted, and the work of the CCI made tangible through oral histories that you could directly connect to through QR codes. And since then, we've also had opportunities to connect subject matter experts, particularly on this campus, to the student body and campus community through a series of site walks, of activations revolving around Earth Day and the ecology of the site, really embedding the history of the place in the campus today and making that tangible and connected to the students and those here today, really exposing the geology of the place and the ecology of the site. And our knowledge of the site, as you see it here configured today, we really have come to this point of understanding of how there are a series of factors that may not be working and that it can be better designed to support the future of the space and the future of the student body and campus community. We recognize that the East Mall lacks cohesion, accessibility, and has a series of unresolved issues relating to particularly utilities and infrastructure, like stormwater management, for example. We know that it's not ideal to have large swatches of grass that can't be inhabited, or to have gravel that's uncomfortable to walk over, dangerous to walk over, and that it can get muddy and miserable, and that there's nowhere for rainwater to appropriately drain, creating conditions that aren't appropriate for the space or contributing to its functionality. And so that leads us into our work on the actual redesign of the East Mall. And from what we've learned about the campus and about the region, about the precursors, what we understand is that there is a dynamic shift that the precursors brought forward to the campus, and that parallels can also be drawn between the dramatic upward movement or tectonic shifting of the earth and the surrounding geology of the Balcones region, which Austin is situated in, and that can directly be linked to the momentum of the precursors. So this concept of uplift is really grounding our conceptual design work, which you'll see more of as we move through the deck. So what we see here is the existing site plan, the current configuration of the campus. You have this central access of the mall that you move through currently that's bifurcated by two pathways on a pathway on either side. The fountain in the center that doesn't currently work. And then the termination of the site in a largely unshaded, uncovered roundabout function area for vehicular drop-off. And what we see here is the newly proposed scheme for the East Mall. And so this design flips the current configuration, prioritizing wider central access and clear sight lines to the end of the site, creating spaces on either side for more intimate places of rest, places of smaller gathering, and also spaces to encounter the interpretive content and stories of the precursors and others. You see a removal of the fountain and replacement of that with a larger commemorative space. And so as you move through number 1, you'll see commemorative elements that really reveal the story of the precursors through embedded, etched, or materially tangible quotes and interpretive content. Terminating in the open plaza at the end that is really meant to support larger gathering and larger function and greater general movement. So here we see the 4 conceptual design components that are really driving the different series of pieces within the mall. The primary being the path. Then you have tectonic breaks, which are shifts in the story. And so these might celebrate early efforts of the university, human sweat, and then largely the precursors. There are also rooms and stories. And so the first of those is the path. And the path is the primary vehicle of movement. The central artery that moves you through chronologically from west to east, the story of UT's evolution and the story of the precursors. And here we see a rendered version of that path with lush plantings, smaller water features, and the preservation of the live oaks that are currently existing in the East Mall proper. Here's another version of how you might approach the central path. On either side, you might see a vertical geological uplift, which we'll be partnering with an artist on to further envision what these spaces might look like as you come to the interpretive content and the tangible stories. Next are the tectonic breaks, which are a series of shifts that break the spine and represent those historic moments. And so this is an image of the central tectonic break, or the precursor commemorative element. And you see this at the base of the site, how you might move toward the detail of the commemoration space. The detail is even more present here and more visible in this perspective of standing in one of 2 sensory gardens in which you might come to the content and be able to really read more pieces of the precursor stories and see names and dates that might be etched in stone, or these prominent quotes that might come to the forefront through metal pieces. And as we further refine the commemorative elements of this design, we're balancing a number of things. We're balancing pertaining to the experience of implicit and explicit narrative content, so how you might interact with it, whether it be through shadows or etchings, carvings, whatnot, to the tactility and sensorial experiences that you might have within the site. The design also presents spaces alongside the tectonic breaks that are areas for smaller gathering and personal respite and reflection. And so this is a visualization of one of those outdoor room areas intended for comfort and also interpretive elements to find housing in. Where you might find those QR codes more directly accessible, or spaces to be seated under the live oak trees that are existing within the space, or lush gardens. But they also serve a purpose of infrastructure in terms of environmental performance, creating bioswales to really handle the lack of stormwater management that we're currently seeing within the East Mall functional space. And you might also find the room centered on bravery, for example, as we've been working to program these spaces around values that the precursors have embodied to be matched with spaces that are functional to the student and campus community. So under bravery, for example, it might be an amphitheater or a plaza space which you come to and share to your class a presentation, or a group learning or discussion might be had within that space. And within the Perseverance programmed valued room, you might come to a reflective garden or an outdoor classroom space that really allows you to sit with the content or study or whatever it might be within that space. And finally, we have the stories component of the design. which the particular program spaces are one component, but you might find more intimately these pointal pieces of the design like you saw in Site Activation 1. So here you see depicted the story of human sweat. This is one iteration of what it might look like to come to that content or one of the tectonic breaks, and to see that story reflected within the mall. In some of the programmed room spaces, it might look more like a pointal approach where you come to a marker in whatever material it might be that has a QR code embedded within it, which might link you to the content. And finally, we have the plaza space where all of these stories coalesce and people come together for large gatherings. So here you might see how people might move through it on the day-to-day basis, or for a larger gathering, larger function that might spill out from the Winship Drama Building or from Patton Building, but largely just giving space for those larger gatherings to occur. So we really hope that this story resonates with you and that you find these spaces to resonate with you. And we look forward to hearing what you're excited about in this work and answering any general questions. So we'll go ahead and take questions at this time and then have some guiding prompts.
If you could just pull your hair.
Thank you. Who?
Any questions for Victoria?
Thank you very much for this wonderful design. Our project to redesign is small and the very space on which we study and work on this campus. So I have a question for you, which has come out from our group, the group we are working with, on the indigeneity component. So, because that's what I don't see in what you have presented so far, which also exceeds the question of the history of the people, is the question of the land. And have you had some discussion about it in terms of redesigning the space to honor the very land on which we work, study, and live here?
I think to this point, we've had discussion with subject matter experts and site walks, particularly in the School of Geological Sciences. We've engaged some of the faculty there in the history of the place, the history of Waller Creek, and the ecological conditions surrounding the site. So we have engaged them as stakeholders and are very excited to continue to engage and learn more about the land and the history of the space throughout this process and incorporate that.
Thank you, Victoria, for the design side of that. From the kind of the history side of that and thinking about this, Victoria, if you want to go back to some of the schematic designs where it shows, other people's and other experiences, spaces for that. Let's go.
Would you like
Doesn't really matter. That's fine.
perspectival content? Or?
So one of the things, Luis, that we're thinking of is this is, as Victoria was saying, a chronological notion of history starting from west to east. And so we haven't specified, particularly on the western side of this, exactly which experiences are going to be represented, in part because politics, as you well know, of representation and et cetera, make it difficult right now to be explicit about that. the notion of indigeneity and where indigeneity stands in relation to this will be contemplated in that kind of move. And then Mass is particularly interested, as are we, in Waller Creek and what Waller Creek means in terms of original occupation, et cetera. So there's both indigenous, but also Waller Creek is a particularly potent space in relationship to the originality of blackness in this area as well. And so we're working through those things as we design this. So it's not forgotten. It's part of what we're doing. And as you know, we have asked you to provide the historic aspect of that, which we will be, when you're through with it, we'll be bringing into play in terms of thinking about this.
Yeah, I just want to add that we are about to complete a video documentary focused on Peace Park and West Campus, because Peace Park by the mid 19th century was a cotton plantation. That history has been erased even from the public space in the city. So, but through working with some community members, especially elders who are native to Central Austin, Lipan Apache in particular, what I have been learning is that all these lands were stone and buffalo grass. And then because later, because of the urban developments, quote unquote, and then the cattle industry, they killed buffalo grass on these lands. So it would be interesting to explore the possibility to have even a kind of small space for buffalo grass on this new design for campus. So that's an idea. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. We definitely look forward to exploring further the history of the place and these histories and just uplifting them in the design. Other questions? Great. Well, I think we can move into some prompts that we have as well, questions for you all. So our first one is, are there general questions? So if you have a question that you might like to write in for the design team to consider as we continue this work, it would be really helpful to collect your feedback. So we've embedded some QR codes, which you can scan through photos with your phone. And at this link, you'll type in East Mall, capital E, capital M, as the hashtag, and that will allow you to drop your questions or any input that you might have on where the design stands currently and what you might like to see within the space. So we'll take a few minutes for that, and then we'll open the next prompt. Are there questions that individuals might have online? Okay. And the next question we have for the room, as well as those joining us in person, are what excites you about this project? What are you looking forward to in this process? If anybody in the room would like to answer out loud, please feel free. But you can also write in.
To me, one of the things that's exciting is the precursors themselves and their stories and some of the values. And I know it was on one of the slides back in there, but I thought it might be interesting to see, if you read some of the things that they said they want to get out of this project, because it's really about celebrating them in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and just to go back to that slide, it's been wonderful to work so closely with the precursors and to hear directly from them their stories, their experiences on this campus, and what it is that they would like to see celebrated and uplifted within the space, and some of the values that really underpinned their experiences on campus. Many of them have spoken to bravery and how they came to the space as such young individuals and all that they were met with, and resilience, perseverance, the efforts of seeking and the pursuit of knowledge. So these are some of the things that we've captured, but it's just been a joy to work with all of you on that.
Do you have something on that other slide with the curvy arrows and stuff? We talked about that or something?
Let's see. Curvy arrows, I might have.
It's at the very beginning, kind of.
Yes, precursor experiences. Yes. Yeah, so I think in coming to this work and framing the project early on and learning all of the stories that we're seeking to uplift, it's been a unique experience to hear the stories of coming to the campus in the 1950s and subsequently, and while some may have started and finished, others might have taken sabbaticals during their time or come back to the campus after years of service in the military or whatnot. So each experience of the precursors is unique, and it's been great to capture.
Since I think I'm the only precursor in the room, I guess I should say something. The first thing I'd like to say on behalf of all of the precursors is how grateful we are and thankful for the work that the project has brought forth thus far through the leadership of Dr. Ted Gordon and his team. And Mass, we're very, very pleased with the product that you have produced. And you did a good job of summarizing some of the comments that have been made on our Zoom meetings. And I think it would be very helpful if you had some of the comments in writing to present to the members here, because there were a variety of different emotions, because each of us that came in different times had different experiences. Myself coming in 1956, although there were African Americans here before, I came as a freshman, a 17-year-old freshman coming to college, thinking that I was going to have the experience of a lifetime, and I did. Not the type that I was expecting, however. But I think the most difficult thing for us living in the barracks that we lived in, we formed a bond that was long lasting in the friendship that was developed because we had that experience. But coming to campus and finding that there was no place to eat on campus on the weekends, that we had to walk to the east side to find a place to eat because, of course, all of the local restaurants were segregated at the time, and that was quite a learning experience. And but just to summarize the project, you will never understand, I don't think, how meaningful it is to us who came here completely naive in some cases, and to leave here, because everyone knows when I said that I left here, I did not have a great appreciation for the university. However, I did find that I did learn through experience how beneficial the degree was to have received a degree from the University of Texas. But then coming back years later to see how the administration had made a complete 180-degree change in attitude in terms of addressing some of the injustices that had taken place before. That was very heartwarming and gave me the inspiration and the desire to be a full-fledged burnt orange person. So I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who is working toward this project and to the administration who is providing support to the project.
Thank you, and I am the baby of the group. I was 2 years old when Leon came here. So it's one thing that I would like to say has been fluid throughout the times. And sadly, but historically, some of the same barriers that he experienced were still active when I came. And mainly, and the most prominent one was the frustration of being treated differently under the guise of everybody being the same. And that is a frustration that we all experienced. And I, too, am happy to see that our stories are being told. And again, as Leon said, despite the, for lack of a better word, trauma that we experienced as undergrads, once you got that degree, it allowed you to experience better. And it because it's recognized worldwide, it makes it feel not all worth it, but it makes it feel like your experience is now at least rewarded. That's it.
So much, both of you, for sharing that and for sharing your experiences. I'm so excited to see this as a physical space that's solidifying those histories and really creating a space where people can come and find this as tangible material, that they can easily access these stories and understand them, the history of what came before our time on campus. So thank you all for your engagement in this process, and I look forward to the rest of the work. And our final question that we'll open is, how can we create a better design for the UT campus community in the future and today? What aspects might you like to see within the design? So we'll open that for a few minutes. But also, if anybody else in the room would like to share out loud aspects that they would like to see that might not be highlighted in the work yet, it would be great to hear. Mm-hmm.
Can I have your mic? I just had is this on? Yeah, I had a quick question about the Martin Luther King Jr. statue. Is that something that's going to be staying in its exact spot whenever you guys redesign the East Mall, or will it be moved? And I asked specifically because there is an event, there's a march that happens every year from, I believe, our campus to HT, and that's to the Capitol and then HTU. Which is a really big part of UT's history. It's been done for several years, so just wondering whether that statue would stay in its place.
Sure. So currently, we're still working through iterations of locations. Oh. Thank you. we're working through a series of iterations of locations for the MLK statue. And we understand that there are large events that happen and marches that happen around MLK Day. And so it's currently in the position of the center of the East Mall, but number 5 towards Speedway is where we've proposed it for the sake of this report, making it more accessible and easily reachable for that larger volume function of people to move through the space. And so a number of options are being considered on relocation to some point within the East Mall or creating a more ceremonial space in its current function and current location.
What would the precursor memorial have?
Sure. So the precursor memorial, which would be the series of sloping walls surrounding a direct ramp down to the base of the space, is surrounded by sloping walls and commemorative reflection gardens. And so you might see etched in that larger mass of rock or the sloping face of the walls themselves, precursor names, dates that they might have entered the university, direct quotes from the precursors themselves, links to CCI interpretive content, but still iterating through how you might tangibly come to that history. It is 4:06. Okay. Any other general questions or pieces of the work that you might like to speak more to?
Hi, I hate to ask this question, but are there security measures being taken or thought about regarding this at all?
Sure. So I think in the central spine itself, we've really been working to create better access and greater sight lines, and so that you can see directly down the mall, and that is a broader, expansive path than what we currently see. In terms of accessibility and safety, we've been uplifting, really making this a greater functioning space for wheelchair users and pedestrians. Increased lighting measures and increased sight lines and hiding holes like what we're seeing currently in the scheme of things today near the Weller Creek area and that service entrance toward the Alumni Center space, among a series of other measures.
To that, we are also working with many of the UT staff stakeholders, including the UTPD and ITS security. So I don't know if you're also thinking about vandalism of some sort. So the university does have cameras in places. We have call buttons. And so we are looking at all of those sorts of things like we do all over campus to create better safe spaces.
Any other questions for Victoria? Oh,
Hi, I was wondering if there is any kind of interactive or participatory element to this design. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, once the memorial and design is completed, is it supposed to stay static, or are there elements that are meant to kind of embrace change over time, or entice the viewer to kind of see it as a living space and participate in that way? I'm just curious.
Sure. I think in terms of the interpretive content and something that's been really brought to our attention through stakeholder engagement, like, for example, with the Del Gates Complex and computer sciences, is really making these stories something that might rotate throughout the site, so that you might come to this content and be able to find different updates on CCI work or on different stories. And so really interpreting maybe digital aspects into the work so that every time you come to it, you might find something different.
Thank you so much to both of our presenters. All right, so we've got some time set aside for a more open general Q&A. You can ask questions about the history of these projects, how they came into being, where we see them going over the next couple of years, anything about what Dr. Gordon was speaking about as well, if we maybe moved a little bit too fast and you didn't get to ask any questions there. So just once again, opening up the room for questions about anything and everything related to both of the projects and the student organizing that went into establishing them. In the back, yes, ma'am.
How long will the East Mall project take?
This is a great question. That's for one of y'all.
Hi, everybody. I'm the project manager with campus planning, design, and construction, Robin Camp. Right now, we're scheduled. Our goal is to break ground by October 2025. We've been given the go-ahead for the commemorative area, so all the way up the mall. We're designing that, but we don't have the funding yet to do the entire thing. So the commemorative area, we hope the plaza also should be completed by like January 2027. That being said, we'll have some coordination because athletics is there on game day, so we'll have some coordination to deal with that. And we haven't scheduled that out completely, but that's our goal. We'd like to break ground in 2025.
Is it gonna like be built all at once, like shutting down East Mall, or is it gonna be like in pieces, like throughout time?
Figured I'd throw mine in the mix.
No, we wouldn't shut down everything all at once. We'll have to do it in sequences. We'll work with our contractor to work out how access will occur and how we can still safely, get to all the buildings and get through there, because we'll have to continue to make that a passageway, which is obviously a big corridor for the university people who are coming from the buses and the garages to get up to campus.
So my question is about funding. I've heard funding mentioned twice. So who is in charge of getting the funding for it? And how is that playing out? And how does that affect the start date for this project?
So we right now have been given a budget of $35 million, which will fund that commemoration area. We're looking for, I assume I can say all this, we're looking for another $10 million in order to do the plaza area and the commemoration at the same time. The budget for the whole project right now is about $88 million. What was that?
124.
Oh, I have the vision plan right here. I need to refer to it. That's right. Who's in charge of getting all that money, bringing the funding together? It's the university, the provost's office, the president, the development office, TED, the Board of Regents, who will officially, approve things. We have the PDL letter, which is the direction to go towards move forward with schematic. I'm not sure if they've seen it or not, but the president has been given a brief. He got a brief this week, and he's been updated by TED regularly as we've been in design. There's another thing I was going to say about that. Forgot. I know. And did you have anything to add, or?
We're going to try to go as fast as we can and beat those dates that Robin talked about.
Or just looking here online.
Okay, yeah. The dates that were just discussed are preliminary right now, and we'll know better as we start talking about how to phase and stage the work. And the president gave us direction this week to make make progress. So that is a priority for us to try to find creative ways to, do this quickly. So.
Does anyone else have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, this is for you, Dr. Gordon. I missed the part of your talk. So what has the university said about like the progress on like the sweat entrance to like Painter Hall and stuff? Is there like an update on that?
The dates for that are
His mic should be on.
Oh, yeah, all right, good. The dates for that are, I shouldn't breathe too hard over here, 'cause are less firm than even these dates, because one of the big portions of that project is that area that's south of the Painter Building, which will be the Sweat Plaza. That will likely it's being designed now, and it will be constructed along with the rest of the work that's being done on the tower restoration. Now, what the framework for that is, I think it's similar to actually the time framework for the East Mall as well. But to Dan's point, it's, we don't really know, but that's more or less the time frame. In terms of the entrance and the work on the north, it's being designed more or less now, and we have to, when that's going to actually be done is less clear. We've got a few things to get through. Because we went back to the drawing table, we're a little less advanced with that than we are, for example, with the East Mall right now. Hopefully soon. As I said before, these things were talked about initially in 2020. We're in 2023. And so, are you graduating anytime soon? 2026. 2026? I will still be here then. When these are done, I'm not sure you will be. Hopefully. It's a good question. Thank you for it.
All right. Any other questions? Uli, is there any from online? Okay. If there are no more questions, are we comfortable with wrapping up a bit early? Okay. In that case, I want to thank you all once again for being here today. It means a lot to me personally and to the entirety of our team that you all are here to discuss these projects and see their progress and updates. If you would like to stay informed about the Contextualization and Commemoration Initiative, and I do urge you to do so, the easiest way to find us is going to be to search UT in Context on the UT website. We also have an Instagram page that's kept pretty up to date, and that's going to be UT in Context on Instagram as well. I think that we're going to stick around a little bit, so if you have other questions, we have some of the research team here, not to put you all on the spot, but we're going to hang around. So thank you guys so much.